And we do post these after the event. It's usually up within, 2 or 3 hours from now. We'll have it up online. I'm going to drop in the chat the link to the website where we'll have the PowerPoint, handouts, and later this afternoon, the video recording of this session. I'm going to pass things over to Mr. Powell, who's going to begin his talk. You're muted, Troy.
There we go. Sorry about that.
No worries.
That's what happens when we use Zoom and Teams. I thought I stayed unmuted the whole time, and my apologies. Let me back up for a second. I got my camera straight ahead and my information, the PowerPoint that you're seeing, so everybody can see it pretty well, and everybody can hear me good. Okay, awesome. Yeah, so my name is Troy Powell. I'm the division manager for community improvement. We're in the neighborhood development department for the city. And what my team does is we enforce all of the Greensboro Minimum Housing Code for all residential structures in the city. And we also enforce the Good Repair Ordinance, which is all non-residential structures in the city, pretty much all structures in the city. Once they've received their certificate of occupancy, it becomes our responsibility for maintenance. We also enforce the quality of life issues around these structures and on these premises, such as tall grass, trash and waste, junk cars, the things that make a property really unsightly and uncomfortable to live around. That might bring wildlife next to your home and just increases the health issues. But what we're going to talk about today is kind of when to reach out to code enforcement for housing issues. All right, so here's just some brief things that we're going to cover. The risk of health versus routine repairs, given a landlord-tenant type relationship, the owner and occupant responsibilities. The city ordinance does outline kind of what the owner, the landlord, is responsible for, but it also outlines what the occupant's responsible for. That's really good for the housing inspector, kind of know who to hold who responsible. When to call code enforcement. We're going to talk about what condemnation looks like and what the conditions of a structure is that would make it unfit for human habitation. And that is the real question that the inspector has to find in their determination, is that a structure is unsafe and unfit for human habitation. We're going to talk about why maintain your property inside and outside. Go over a property self-inspection where it has a brochure where you can check yourself. We have this available online. It'll be available on this site as well. And tenants working together. We'll go through that. I'll explain that a little more. How to report a violation, what to expect in the process, how you can follow your case progress without always calling on the telephone if you don't want to go through the hassle of speaking with someone. And then we'll end up with emergency housing assistance. So risk to health versus routine repairs. So the biggest part that the landlord is responsible is basically the structure's integrity. If it's inside the house, if it is permanently affixed to the ceiling, the walls, the floors, if it is the floors, walls, and the ceiling, the windows, the doors, anything that makes up the structure, before you moved into that apartment, that entire building and that apartment all belongs to the owner. It is the owner's responsibility to maintain it structurally sound. The owner has to, since the structure has its piping system, its bathroom system, to get water inside, get sewer outside, they have to also provide hot water. They also have to provide heat, a system that will provide heat that maintains 68 degrees from the center of the room or 3 feet off the wall of every habitable room in the apartment. The inspectors do have temperature gauges that they will check this, and this is the time of season where we're getting a lot more complaints of heating systems. Now, if it's really cold outside, We're going to check the system to see if the system is capable of 68 degrees. But that's what they're looking for. So they have to provide heat as well. A leaky roof, open ceiling. You see in a picture here, it could be just a little leak and that goes to a big one. And that really can create a lot of serious problems. So that's one of the biggest health issues there. We don't want the ceiling collapsing. We don't want it opening up that exposes the occupants to insulation. You also have operable plumbing. Now, as you'll learn later, the tenant has responsibilities of keeping the fixtures in the plumbing system clean and operable. So we were talking about your sink, your toilet, your bathtub, your shower. As they are, if you had taken them over, you have to maintain the cleanliness of them. Now, if you have sewer backing up in those pipes, that's a different story. That is a landlord issue. Landlord needs to get a plumber in there and to fix that. There's ways of fixing it. We just need to get them to fix it. Anytime you have septic that or sewage that actually comes back in, it may not necessarily be the discolored water, like when a toilet stops up. That's not necessarily sewage coming back, backfilling from the system. That's just what's in that area at that time. But if you actually have the sludge and everything else from the sewage coming back in, that's a huge problem. And that is a major violation for us. We do not want you to live in that environment. Safe electrical systems. Everyone's got children. We want covers on the outlets. We don't want no wires exposed. Nothing should be arcing or whatsoever. This is a health hazard, safety, and it's responsibility of its owner. And an operable heating system. Whether they use the heating system or not, there has to be a heating system designed for that house. The city ordinance does not designate a specific time period like other cities generally do. So what that means is it's all year round. And it's because, and I think it's probably because we're in North Carolina. It can be 70 degrees on Christmas Day or New Year's Day, or it can be 32 degrees in the middle of the summer. Take your pick on what the weather could be. So it's good that the city ordinance actually has it for that reason. You got routine repairs. So remember I said risk and health versus routine. So routine, you're looking at changing an air filter to keep your AC system and heat system working properly. Dripping faucets, running toilets, small holes in the carpet. Now notice I say holes in the carpet, not holes in the floor. If there's a hole in the floor, hole in the wall, the ceiling, busted windows, those are all landlord issues that they have to be maintained. And those are things that have to be corrected. So they would end up being minor violations of the housing code. But these are just some routine. Now, I'm going to talk about 3 sections in the city ordinance where it outlines some pretty clear responsibilities. Now, understand I have broken it down for the PowerPoint, but if you go to the ordinance itself, you can see all the verbiage for each line. And the city ordinance is located, I'll have a website at the end, but if you go to the Greensboro's website or just type in Greensboro Code Compliance, there's a link on that page for the city code of ordinances. And the housing code is all in chapter 11. So owner responsibilities is 11-8. Now, all of these responsibilities, if the inspector finds this or is complaining, the owner must comply with this within 48 hours. If they do not in 48 hours, we're going to be issuing a civil penalty and we're going to be making a decision. The inspector is going to have to make a decision. Is it safe for the tenant the occupant to remain in this space awaiting repairs, or are they going to go ahead and condemn the space? Which when they condemn the dwelling, then the occupant is going to have to find another place to stay that is safe. One of the things we're going to do is we're not going to condemn a dwelling or an apartment until we know you have a safe place to stay. We are going to reach out to the staff in our department, the homeless prevention coordinator. We're going to reach out to the COC, and we're going to reach out to our community partners, the Greensboro Housing Coalition, and we're going to find you a safe place to stay in its interim. So the owner is responsible for any broken, bursted, frozen, inoperable plumbing pipes and fixtures. Remember, those things are permanently affixed to the structure. Repair any exposed and unsafe wiring. Same thing. It's permanently fixed to the structure. So it's in the walls. Repair and replace unsafe or dangerous cooking or heating equipment provided by the owner. Some houses have these older radiators on the wall, heaters running along the floor. If any of those become unsafe, dangerous, arcing, or inoperable, we will make the owner remove them. If the stove that the owner provides for your apartment is arcing, overheating, we're going to make them replace it. That is under the code, that's listed as appliances. And also they got to repair and replace fuel storage tanks or supply lines that are leaking, improperly supported, or dangerous. Some apartments, you have natural gas, and you have propane tanks on the premises. That's what this section is referring to in the owner's responsibilities. So there's only 4 in the code. Now, occupant responsibilities. So this is 11-9. This also has a 48-hour rule, but it's treated just a little bit differently. Because what happens is with the owner, the inspector has to give them 48 hours to repair. And if they do not, they issue civil penalty, and they can go ahead and issue condemnation. Right now, I've suspended the inspector's ability to immediately condemn. I require supervisor's decision as well with them. And the reason being is I don't want the mere failure to comply with a minor violation of the housing code to displace a family that can stay in the dwelling safely while we are in the middle of a pandemic. And that is a procedural step for us. But we are trying to keep people safely as possible in a safe space. That is our goal. So we will evaluate the safety of that occupant versus having to displace them. So, but in this situation here, if we identify that the violation of the problem is the occupant's responsibility, we're going to give them 48 hours to resolve it. If they don't resolve it in 48 hours, the inspector is going to invite them to an administrative hearing. At the administrative hearing, that is where the owner is invited to that hearing as well. They're going to talk about it, discuss it, see what your plan of action is. And when they issue your order that you must comply, that order is going to have a 48-hour time limit. So now we've got 2 sets of 48 hours out there. If the condition is not yet remedied, that inspector might give you one final 48 hours before they're going to start issuing a civil penalty. So the civil penalty that can be assigned to the landlord is also eligible for the occupant under these types of violations, and we'll go over those. You'll notice that they're not anything that is fixed to the real part of the structure. Okay, so let's talk about them. So keeping an apartment clean and sanitary. So hopefully anybody that receives an apartment, it's clean. Hopefully the floors are clean, the carpets, been vacuumed. There's no spider webs and stuff. I mean, they could be, but you know what I mean. Hopefully it is turnkey. Because if I go in, I've lived in an apartment before. It was really clean, really nice. I got my key, everything's locked. I checked it out and I accepted it. So when you go in, check everything. If it's not acceptable, don't accept it. And feel free to report it to code compliance, and I will show you how to do that later. Keep all plumbing and fixtures clean and sanitary. If you don't keep them clean, if you let them clog up, sometimes, when you, like for myself, when I shave in the sink, it'll clog up a little bit because of the facial hair that will go down into the drain. Sometimes you can just unscrew the little drain, screws to the left, unscrew, pull it out, pull anything that may be stopping it. You really don't need a plumber for that part if you have that type of drain that will simply unscrew. If you want to check, hop on YouTube. The best way of educating yourself. That's one of the ways that I look for some of the stuff around the do-it-yourself stuff around my home. Just unscrew it, clean it up, put it back in, see if it holds water. You've fixed your problem. That's just small maintenance stuff. If if the handles are loose or it's not giving a lot of water, just look yourself and see what your piping system under the sink looks like. But if you have to go into the floor, the foundation, or into the walls where that piping goes, that is an owner issue. The fixture itself on the outside is generally the tenant, because the tenant will put stuff up underneath the sink, and if your storage cracks, bust a pipe, the owner can fix it, but that might cause flooding in that apartment, causes greater issues. So always know where your shut-off valves are for your lines. All of them have a shut-off valve. Exterminate. Now, this is a big one. We get a lot of complaints about infestations, infestations of roaches, most recently German roaches. So here's the dilemma with this. You exterminate if the owner provided you with an adequate rodent-proof building and only one apartment is affected. So if I'm in this one apartment and I see a roach, or I keep seeing roaches, talk to your neighbors, see what they are seeing in the same apartment. And we're going to talk about tenants working with other tenants. If neighbor on the left is not seeing roaches or mice, whichever one, and the tenant to the right has no evidence or photos of them either, and it's just yours, then the occupant is responsible for the extermination. Now, your lease agreement may already have an agreement where they come in weekly to spray, or monthly, or however. If they do, communicate with the management and let them know what you're seeing. Send pictures of what you're seeing. Send pictures of where you think they're coming from, so that they can see how they can prevent that. But if it is just one unit, it's the occupant. Now, where it says adequate rodent-proof building, that means when you took over that space, you didn't have no holes in the walls, holes in the floors, holes in the ceiling. It was weather tight. There shouldn't be any rodents or anything in there. If you received it that way, then it is your responsibility. If more than one unit in an apartment building is affected, and if unit A is affected and unit B is right beside it, it's affected, then yes, that is going to be the owner's responsibility when more than one dwelling unit is infested with insects, rodents, or any other type of pest. Dispose of garbage in approved receptacles. Obviously, if you put a lot of combustible materials inside the home, pile them up, trash and everything, and you don't get it out of the apartment, that's on the occupant. That is going to increase the fire load of your apartment. It's gonna make it harder to escape in the case of fire. So you don't want to let piles of clothes, piles of stuff build up. If you do, it's only going to hurt your escape in case of fire. One of the things also on the premises is no furniture, auto parts, junk, or materials stored on the premises that cause a fire hazard or endanger the health. So this is going to be the area right outside. Now, if you're in an apartment building, it's going to be the area kind of like right outside your front door, right outside your back door, because everything else is either going to be someone else's space or it's going to be common areas. And if you see common areas that are unkept, report those. We'll take a look at that and have management address it, because it's covered in another code in Chapter 17 of nuisances. But if you have a house and you're renting or leasing a house, then this would apply to you. So on the outside of the structure, dispose of garbage in garbage containers. If you've maximized what the city's provided you, then you would have to get them yourself. And it's best if you could do so, where it's behind your home and not necessarily visible to the street or the adjacent property. That's where we get the most complaints. When a person buys a house and they invest in a house in a neighborhood, they look at the neighborhood, and you've probably done this, and they're like, this is a great looking neighborhood. I love it here. I want my kids to grow up here. I like this environment. But then someone comes in and they park their cars on the front grass of the house. They start working on cars. First car gets broke down. Second car comes in, gets broke down. Now there's tires all over the place. There's grease all over the ground. The grass has started to growing up 2 to 3 feet tall. That pretty neighborhood that you saw when you first invested is starting to diminish. Get our attention as quickly as possible. The inspectors are complaint driven, which means the community calls us to their areas of where they're having the problems. Right now, I don't have the staff, I don't have enough inspectors to be proactive to where they're actually driving neighborhoods and checking to see what needs to be done. We do, if the inspector is called to property number one, and on the left of it, to the right of it, or across the street, they're seeing obvious violations, they're going to address them. They're authorized to do so. But they can't just keep going, they can't go door to door down the street with no citizens bringing us to that street. Because otherwise we already have about 130 complaints coming in a week. So, to me, that's 130 citizens that are requesting our assistance per week, and that's where my employee resources need to go. So if you're having that problem, I need to get the inspectors there rather than going to look for the problems ourselves and not addressing the priorities. A little more, there are 11, so you notice there's 2 slides. So maintain fuel storage tanks in a safe condition. So, if what that is, it's there for the owner, you maintain it, don't damage it, alter it, or do anything else with it. Not occupy the unit without water sewer services operable. Now, if the water system, if your water bill is in the occupant's name, the occupant is required to keep that water turned on and in a proper working order. If the water's in the owner's name, then the owner has this responsibility, especially if a tenant is present. You cannot, one of the major violations is you have to have a potable water supply. You have to be hooked into a sewer system or approved septic system. If you do not, you are not allowed to stay in that space. You would need to seek a temporary safe space until those are repaired. Not place in the structure any oil, gas fired portable or non-vented cooking stove or heater in an apartment or in your house. Use what is there. If your landlord allows you to replace a stove, great. If you're the landlord, know what you can put in there, but don't bring in these other type of devices. You'll have people bring in kerosene heaters, especially like with the snowstorm coming up with the potential that power is going to be out. You have to be very careful because what'll happen is you end up with carbon monoxide in the space, and that is a deadly gas. You can't smell it. You would be able to come by it in your sleep. And you want to be very careful because it requires that you have ventilation. If you have a kerosene heater in the room, you have to have a window open. Well, it seems to kind of defeat the purpose a little bit, because you're letting all the cold air in, and you're more likely to run into kerosene heater because of the cold air on the outside. So do look at other alternatives, other options. There are generator options, or you may just have to go to a friend or family's house, and go ahead and plan that. Reach out and see who's available, that you may could go to. Pack you a temporary bag so that you could move if you get it without power and you don't have the ability to stay warm. And we also have our shelters and resources in place as well. Go ahead and look online for that information so you know what to do. Always have a plan. And like I said, go ahead and we got a winter storm coming. Go ahead and plan for a power outage, temporary period of time, or up to 3 days. Know what you're going to do, know where you're going to go. If you don't have a plan in place, then it's going to be disastrous or chaotic for you in trying to establish a plan then. So online, there's a lot of great references for preparing yourself for any type of a natural weather event. Don't cause damage to the unit that makes it unfit. If your landlord has fixed the apartment, and say, for example, the landlord is not keeping the place in a good fit condition, they send a contractor in, they fix the window. Well, you need to have more than 5 violations of the housing code in order for the inspector to be able to take an action. Don't go bust a window or bust another window. you cannot contribute to the violations of the apartment. If you do, the inspector is going to have to issue the occupant the civil penalty rather than the owner of the property. If the owner is not contributing to the violation, the owner cannot be issued a civil penalty. So when people read, when you read the ordinance, you'll think, hey, this is what the owner got to do. I'll make sure this is not right so that they can get a penalty. We will not issue a penalty if we find that the owner has not contributed. And we're gonna look back and forth, but you'd be amazed at some of the situations that we run into every day. And we've really came through a lot. There's been a lot of stress on a lot of people, everybody, over the last 2 years with the pandemic. And we just want to keep people safe, and we will work our hardest to get that management company, to get that property manager in your apartment, fix your conditions, or fix whatever they need to do. But if you hear someone doing that, please advise them not to do that. It's working against the process that's trying to help them during that limited period of time that we might even have to contribute to help them. Maintain the utilities when it's in the occupant's name. If the electricity is in your name, you have to maintain it with the power on. You can't be in a dwelling unit that does not have power. You can't be in a dwelling unit that does not have water and sewer service supply. If the power's off or the water's off, the inspector's going to give 48-hour notice, and they're going to try to find a safe place for you. But like I said, if you go to a friend or family's house, that will be acceptable, and then the inspector is going to close up the dwelling by way of a condemnation placard. So when to call for code enforcement, what we're all here for. So 11-10 talks about when a structure is unfit for human habitation. That is the key thing. We cannot condemn a structure unless it's unfit. So what you're going to see here, you're going to see conditions of what a structure is to be unfit. And we definitely want you to call us in these situations, period. So any violations of the owner responsibilities that we covered earlier, and this PowerPoint is available online. Interior walls, leaning, buckling, or failing. If, I think most everybody can tell when I look at a wall, like I'm looking at my wall in my house, well, I think that wall is about to break, bust, it's leaning. Something about it is coming apart. The plaster on the wall seems to be cracking. Something ain't right. That's a leaning and buckling. You may have seen most recently in the news, I believe an apartment complex, Block 43, where they had a party of 150 people up on the upper floor, the second floor of an apartment building, jumping up and down. Well, the tenants down below could clearly see the 2x4s, the skeleton outline of the flooring system coming up and down from the roof. That is buckling, and that actually buckled those floor systems just before a collapse, because that floor system did fail. But it's supported, but it did fail, created a most dangerous situation. Supports of the structure damaged or deteriorated. We sometimes have vehicles that strike buildings, vehicles that run into a house. We have storm damage, where high winds, tornado may damage the structure. Even if the porch falls off the house, or the front part collapses a little bit, any of those things that fall off or shift, that is supports of the structure. And you're going to want to look at the foundation. So on the foundation, you may have bricks or you may have blocks. And when you start to see the cracks in on, what's happening is the earth, the foundation is shifting, it's settling. And as it is settling, the structure is going to shift. And when it does, those things need to be repaired. The floors of the roofs, improperly distributed loads. You may have too much stuff in on a floor level, to where you walk in and you kind of notice the floor is a little squishy, or the floor seems to sink, or you pour a little bit of water on the floor and you notice that all the water goes one way. It shouldn't do that. If you happen to drop something or drop a ball on the floor and the ball all rolls to a corner, it really shouldn't do that. The floor should be somewhat level to a degree. It's not a violation if it's not, but you may see that there's a commercial freezer in that apartment and that's contributing to the weight. Or you may have more than one refrigerator in one spot, that's contributing to the weight. Damage by fire, wind, or other things that are rendering it unsafe. Obviously, fire conditions, Red Cross is going to help put you in a safe place until your apartment can be fixed or repaired, or you can be relocated to a safe place to stay. Wind damage, again, wind damage for busted windows, doors are knocked off. Any of those situations can make your building unsafe, and you really should not stay there. You should seek a safe place to stay in the interim and notify us. Dilapidation, decay, unsanitary conditions, or disrepair. Now, the unsanitary conditions, do understand that's not necessarily referring to the occupants. Well, it can, but in your apartment, you have to keep the fixtures and appliances, the floors, you got to keep everything clean. You don't have to keep it mopped, shiny, and everything else. That's to your degree, to your pleasure. But you do have to keep things clean. You don't want what can be referred to as mold or anything else to build up. And we'll talk about mold here in a second. But you want to keep things good and ventilated, moisture free, so that you don't have those type things that contribute to those situations. Dilapidation and deteriorating. I'll talk about that in a second when I talk about the 50% rule. Inadequate facilities for egress in case of fire or panic. If you're in an apartment building, the fire marshal is going to check the apartment buildings, the center areas where your access to your rooms are, to your stairwells. They're going to check that prescribed by the state statute every so often to make sure that you don't have storage sitting out, piled up, make sure the stairs are not decaying, rotting, or about to fall off. If you have an apartment upper floor, every door to the upper floor must have a staircase that is structurally sound with guardrails that can allow you to escape, especially in case of fire or panic. And also for the firefighter to be able to escape, if they go in the structure, they got to be able to get out if situations really get dangerous. And we're going to check inside your apartment, just like you do for a business. You can't pile stuff up in front of a door. If you cannot escape that house or escape that room, that's a problem. Always make sure you have clear passive egress from the bedroom to every single door to get out of that house. If you've got to jump over a whole bunch of stuff, go have special knowledge to go through certain paths to get out, problem number one. You're not going to be able to do that in panic or in a fire. I will guarantee that. I've been a firefighter for 30 years. I'm a fire chief now with my local community. And I've seen many situations to where it has hurt people when they do have things really piled up, build up. So if you can, reduce it, get rid of as much stuff as you can so you don't have a lot of clutter there it's really going to hurt you in the event of an emergency. No adequate ventilation. Let's see, defects increasing fire, accident, or calamity hazards. Again, if you have holes in the ceiling, holes in the walls, holes in the floor, when you add more combustible type materials, clothes, paper, trash, cardboard products, anything that's going to burn, when you pile that all up together, that's going to hurt your situation. And if you already have defects in the apartment, it's just going to really hurt it. And now with holes in the wall, it's going to hurt the next apartment. It's going to be able to travel faster because generally your sheetrock has a certain burn time that if a fire happens within it, that sheetrock is going to contain. And that's like your doors. Keep those doors shut. If you have a fire, leave the room, shut the door behind you, shut the door behind the apartment, let that fire stay in that one room, get the fire department there in time so they can protect the other rooms of the structure. If the doors are open or windows are open, it ventilates, and fire just needs heat, heat and a lot of air. And once you ventilated it, fire's going to run. No adequate ventilation, light, heating, or sanitary. So you got to have enough light, especially natural light as well. And if you don't, then you have to have 60-watt light bulbs covering 30 feet areas for your hallways, for your rooms, your laundry area, your bathrooms. Good ventilation and moisture is going to create what you will call mold. I can't call it mold. The inspector cannot call it mold unless it has been tested by a third party and determined that it is mold. But we can look at a discoloration of black, discoloration of white, of what we believe to be mold. And what the inspector is going to look for is that area, how is it ventilating, and what is holding moisture? Because poor ventilation and a moisture environment creates that type of condition. Those two things violate the housing code, but not mold. The word mold does not exist in the code. Because in order for us to use it, it has to be tested by a third party. And even once it's tested, you just have the knowledge that it is mold, but it's still not a violation. So like I said, we're going to be looking for where the ventilation issue is at, if the AC system is not working, if the return's not working, if it's in an enclosed room to where the door never opens, or if there's a water leak that is creating that moisturized area. So you also have no proper electrical, heating, plumbing facilities. Again, those are the three main systems that we talked about earlier that the landlord has to maintain because they are affixed to the structure. Those are not things that you bring in. You may bring in a heater that you could plug into the wall that will oscillate back and forth and give added heat, which is perfectly fine. That type of system that you plug in is perfectly fine, but that can't be your only system. You may not use your heat pump, you may not turn it on, which is fine, but you will have to have the heating system in place that is operable in order to remain in the apartment or the structure. Any of these conditions on the bottom, any of these conditions can result in civil penalties and can result in condemnation. And condemnation can happen sooner if a threat to the occupant or a threat to public safety. Those are in the discretion of the inspector and their supervisor. Let's talk about condemnation. Condemnation is the temporarily or permanently temporarily or permanently protecting the occupants or the public from an unsafe or hazardous condition. And you may hear the word condemnation used in two different ways. We use it because we have to condemn a structure to keep the person safe or the person, the public safe. That's my personal phone. I hope it's not that distracting. Pardon me. All right, that didn't do it, so we'll have to ignore it. Any of the conditions of the city ordinance, sections 11-8, 11-9, 11-10 can result in civil penalties and condemnation. Condemnation can occur sooner, depending on the threat to occupants, the public, or the failure to comply with the order. Condemnation, pardon me just a second. Thank you, sorry about that. Now that I have a house phone in hand, I can stop it from ringing. So condemnation can occur sooner, depending on the threat of the occupants, the public, or the failure to comply with an order. And this was one of the things I told you earlier that has been temporarily changed for the pandemic, is an inspector can give you an order, the occupant or the owner, an order to repair or an order to demolish. And say the order to repair only contains 6 minor violations of the housing code. If you don't comply with those 6 minor violations, even though it's not a threat to safety, not a threat to the occupants, it's just you didn't comply with 30, 60, or 90 days the inspector provided, they do have the authority to condemn and make you move. That is the part that's been temporarily suspended during the pandemic. And I've put an added layer of review that the inspector must review this with their supervisor so that we don't displace a family or a person that can stay in that space safely, and that we don't overutilize our community partners and our resources. So that's a and that may become permanent in the future, but right now it's a temporary policy change. And condemnation means that the owner cannot rent, cannot advertise for rent, and cannot allow anyone to remain in the structure until all violations are corrected. So the inspector is going to try to work with them. They're going to invite them to this administrative hearing, and I'll cover this process in a second, but we're going to spend a lot of time with them and hopefully with the occupant if they participate, and give them time before condemnation occurs. They're even going to issue a civil penalty, hoping that civil penalty will encourage them to comply. And then the next step that the inspector is going to use is condemnation. And we're just, if we're not going to fix it, then we're not going to stay in it, especially if it endangers the occupants, or if it endangers other people or the public. And the public you're dealing with are non-residential structures. Why maintain your property inside and outside? Well, it reduces the likelihood of code violations and complaints filed against you. So if you're in a house and you have trash all in the yard, you have a greater likelihood that your neighbor or somebody in that area is going to report a trash and waste case to code compliance. If you have junk vehicles up on jacks that's being repaired or whatnot off and on, you're probably going to get a complaint. If that's the only time you ever done it that 1 year, not likelihood, but if the car sits out there for a long time, then you're probably going to get a complaint. High grass, the height of grass is 12 inches. That's the city ordinance. If any vegetation growing from the ground is higher than 12 inches, that is a violation of the city code and can get a complaint. If you have vines that run up a side property line fence, goes over onto the other property, you are responsible. So you just kind of trim those at your property line. If you're the one receiving it, you can trim it at your own property line and prevent it from coming over. If you have trees hanging over, tree limbs, that's not a vegetation growing from the ground. So if it's coming over onto your property, you can just get a ladder, just cut it even with your property line. It is not, that's the only thing you can do for that type of situation. Prevent your property from further deterioration. If you see something happen, early detection, get on the horn when you met with your landlord and let them know what's happening. Send them pictures. The best thing you can do when you're a tenant is document. Document with photos, document emails that you're sending information. And this is going to really be helpful, especially if you have to reach out to our Human Rights Department and speak with Mr. Alan Hunt on a fair housing issue, or if you're being treated differently, because there are landlord-tenant rights and there's legal aid available. Document your situation from the get-go. Get your file, save it wherever you have it. And document what you've done. Send certified letters, make them sign for the letters. Send it certified, send it first class mail at the same time. You'll get the card back or you get the envelope back, but if that first class mail don't come back after 10 days, state of North Carolina statute says that is service. So do have that so that you'll have that tangible evidence when if you're ever called to a small claims court hearing for an eviction or any such thing. Save money in repairs later by keeping up with the property. One of the things I would say, it's a common occurrence that I hear, is don't withhold rent just because they're not fixing your property. The magistrate judges will cause an eviction to occur. Don't get yourself in that situation, because that would just simply maximize their efforts to evict. It improves your quality of life and reduces crime. I'm going to speed up a little bit faster. I see the time. So this is a property self-inspection. This brochure is available on the website as a link. This is one that we've designed in our division. So just kind of go through this checklist, see what may apply to you. And it has how you can contact us if you have certain situations. And you'll notice when you go down through here, from my explanations, you're going to know what pertains to the owner, what pertains to the tenant. So if you're the occupant reporting, you'll probably want to square away the things in 11-9 that is about the occupant, and then see what the owner can do, and that'll help you. Occupants trying to comply what they're supposed to do. Now you're wanting the owner to do the same. Tenants working together. Apartments and neglected properties, they share in the same violations. Busted windows, no insect screens, plumbing, electrical, heating issues. Chances are if apartment A has the problem, apartment B's having it too. Doors don't shut easy. Door jambs are broken. Chances are if they hadn't fixed them in A, they ain't fixed them in B either. Infestation of multiple units. Talk to your neighbor, talk to other people around you in your building, because it's a much bigger issue when these violations affect more than one unit in one building. If an inspector goes into one unit and is able to take an enforcement action by the 1/5 rule, which I'll explain in a second, then they can inspect the rest of the building in its entirety with not having any reasons in the other areas. There is a petition, if you have unique knowledge of the interior conditions, by 5 citizens that you can submit, and the inspector has to automatically inspect the dwelling, and you report the information collectively. How to report a violation, you got 373 City. The 2111 number goes straight to my administrative staff, the website, and the LOA email address. What we don't address is building permits, because that's done by development services. Mold, you have to contact an independent contractor, because like I said, what I explained earlier about mold is it's not a violation of the housing code, but the conditions that it causes, poor ventilation and moisture, does. And we're going to address those. Homeowner association agreements is a civil document. We cannot enforce those. So your best recourse would be an attorney. Now that you've reported a violation, what to expect? The inspector is going to use a 1/5 rule. In order for the inspector to take open up an enforcement case, they must have one major violation or more than 5 minor violations. If they don't have that, they cannot open an enforcement case. Always request your case number, the inspector's name, and their phone, and always offer to attend the administrative hearing with the inspector. They're going to issue the order after the hearing. 50% tax rule is that the violations accumulate a cost on our repair schedule greater than the tax value that the Gifford County has assessed, then we're going to issue an order to demolish. If it's less than 50% of that value, we're going to issue a repair order. And then we're going to have a performance period to monitor. Civil penalties can be issued if the owner does not, or the tenant does not work to comply with the ordinance. Condemnation can happen, and then an ordinance can be adopted as an end if the city is prepared to either demolish the structure or repair the structure itself. How to find case progress. If you go to this website here, it's the city's website /cc, or Google Greensboro Code Compliance. We do have a status of code cases where it will take you online to where you can mark active for case status. We've got an instructional bulletin that's on the page to help you navigate it, but you can watch for the inspector's case notes, photos, any property. Just type the property in or type your case, one or the other. You can look on a map. It's got an interactive map where you can see all the violations of the city and what the inspectors are currently dealing with. but just be sure that you make your case active, or you're going to see all 80-some thousand closed cases as well. The magnifying in the glass will help, in the upper right will help you with your address and number. And if you're not seeing progress on your case, I want you to call this number right here. It's 373-2660, or your case officer. But the 2660, this is my administrative supervisor, where we receive it into the division's call center. And she will let me know if the case is not being worked, and we will get you support right away. Emergency housing assistance. So this is my last slide. So this address here is a neighborhood development department link, and your resources for emergency assistance. So if you're homeless or will be homeless in 72 hours, if you get a 48-hour notice, go ahead and plan, okay, that this could occur. If you can't fix the violation of 48 hours, especially if you're the owner, go ahead and start calling family and friends and start making preparations. But we're on our side, we're going to notify our community partners so they also can start planning and making preparations that we might have to provide you with safe housing. Coordinated entry number, this is the number to the county. This is their web address for the COC. And there's a resource guide I had provided to Steve, and I believe it may be linked up on the site for this presentation. You also have the Greensboro Housing Coalition. You can enter ETAP without going through the COC, and that's the Emergency Tenant Assistance Program. And we have the Neighborhood Development Department's Housing Service Emergency Repair. So if there's something that needs to be repaired right away, that might be eligible. So we have that program available as well. So this is my contact information. You're welcome to reach out to me at any time. I always try to return my calls same day or next morning. But just know that I do have it, and I will follow up with you. Connecting with your inspector. If you don't know who your inspector is, call the admin office at 373-2111, or call the supervisor there with the 2660. All the staff, we're going to do what we can to help you. We do not want you living in an unsafe or unsanitary environment. So do give us that opportunity by calling code enforcement, and we'll be there for you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Troy. This has been very informative, useful information, very practical information, all of which is up on the website. I'll drop it once more in the chat for everyone. There were a couple of quick questions in the last 5 minutes here. First of all, noisy neighbors. Is there anything that code enforcement can do? That's a big complaint for many people.
Yeah, so from code enforcement side, I would say no, because it is a noise ordinance of the city, and that is strictly police department.
And secondly, there was a question just to reiterate around not recommending for renters to withhold rent. Can you go into that just a little bit more?
One of the things we do, we go to a lot of our own court cases with collections. They'll call us, the inspectors will go. And the one thing that we hear over and over and over when the judge in the small claims is a magistrate. So when the magistrate is giving feedback, we hear them over and over that says, no matter what the landlord is doing or not doing, you have a contract to pay rent. And so keep paying that rent. And then the judges will say, I'm sorry, my hands are tied. You have a contract. If you don't pay rent, I can't do anything. So we're seeing, we hear more of that. And that's the reason why I had shared that. And we tell others, because the tenant will tell us, they're not coming here to fix it, so I ain't paying rent. And then we'll stop and we'll reiterate to them that, you know, please don't do that part, only because we're hearing it. But understand, we don't have a dog in the fight. Our interest is to help you to get and stay in a safe place.
So as you point out, North Carolina law does not allow you to withhold rent. Other states allow it to be put into escrow or to be held if the landlord is not performing their duties. Here we have abatement as an option. Magistrates can abate a case if you go to court for any repair issues. They may then subtract what you've paid and have the landlord pay you back for arrears if they haven't been providing safe, adequate, up to code places for residents. We have another question in the chat here, probably the last one before the top of the hour. How do you handle a tree falling on your property from an unoccupied home?
Right, yeah, so that would be a code violation. So you can give us a call, and we will address it by way of citing the owner of where the base of the tree is located. That owner for us will have to remove it. If they don't by the 10 days or the extensions provided by the inspector, then the city we will assign a city contractor to remove the tree. Now, if you have a tree that you suspect is going to fall on your property, like it looks unsteady or whatnot, then you can certainly, we would encourage you to write that property owner a letter, send it certified mail, get your green card, and take that letter and your green card to your insurance company, your homeowner's insurance company. What they're going to do is you have now placed that owner on notice, and your insurance company is going to relieve themselves of any claims by finding out the other person's insurance and put them on notice. And of course, once they're on notice, that other insurance company is going to be like, whoa, we ain't going to be responsible for your house if this tree falls. So they're going to send an arborist out there, and they're going to make a decision. And that insurance company is going to tell them, if you want to continue being our client, move that tree, cut those limbs. A lot of things are settled that way. But remember, like I said earlier, documentation, very important. You have to have that documentation. And the more documentation you have, the greater chance of your success if you have to go to court.
Excellent information again. Thank you so much. Again, we'll have this information up on the website. I'll have this recording up in the next 2 or 3 hours here as well. chcs.uncg.edu is our website. We have on the 25th, the evening of the 25th, a Get the Lead Out presentation, also from City of Greensboro, talking about lead safe housing. The link is in the chat if you want to sign up to attend that. Also via Zoom in the evening on Tuesday, the 25th. Thank you everybody for coming and attending. We've had a great turnout, some wonderful questions and very helpful information. Thank you, Troy, once again for making this presentation. We'll see everybody soon.